Welcome to Feminist Founders, a podcast that explores how to create a more equitable world through entrepreneurship. I'm your host, coach and journalist Becky Mollenkamp. Feminist Founders is a listener-funded podcast. Your contributions enable me to continue bringing you these important conversations without corporate advertising. To support the mission, head to feministfounderspodcast.com and sign up for a paid subscription. The link is in the show notes. Now, on to today's show. Welcome back. It's season 3 of Feminist Founders podcast, and I'm so excited to be back after a bit of a long hiatus. I hope you enjoyed the summer break episodes that came out. There's a lot of bonus content all summer long, but now we are back to interviews with amazing founders and people who are challenging business norms. I'm super excited to share all of these episodes. There's big, exciting things happening this season. You'll be hearing more episodes than usual because I have been very busy interviewing and meeting with some incredible people. And I have a new assistant helping me with my episodes that has made things a lot easier. That assistant is AI. And I want to be honest and upfront about where I'm using AI to stay ethical. I will tell you that I use it only to pull information from the transcripts of our conversations, those transcripts that are generated by AI, to then help me create show notes and social media things and information that allows me to get these episodes edited much more quickly. AI is also helping with the editing. AI isn't creating anything from whole cloth, but it is there to help me with the existing content that I have on these episodes to get them done more quickly so that I can get more of this out to you without burning myself out, which anyone who has a podcast knows happens very easily when you have a lot of shows that you're trying to get out. So you will be hearing more interviews this season at a more rapid clip than you're used to, and I'm super excited about that. And I am starting today our first episode back with Chelsey Goodan, who is the author of the bestseller Underestimated: The Power and Wisdom of Teenage Girls, which was endorsed by Oprah's book club, no less, saying that if you have a teenage girl in your life, you need to read this. But I just want to say, even if you don't have a teenage girl, if you were once a teenage girl, you are going to love this episode because we talk about healing that inner teenager inside of you, and it was really powerful. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Chelsey and all of the amazing things to come for season 3. Please hear me on this one point before we get into it, which is if you have not yet liked, reviewed, thumbs up, wherever you're listening, done the things to let the platform you're listening on know that you like the show, will you please do that? It makes a huge difference. I'm trying to increase listenership of the show, and you taking just a few minutes to like, rate, review, share makes all of the difference. So I appreciate it if you're willing to do that. Thank you for your time, for your listenership, and your support. And now let's get into the first episode of season 3. Hi, Chelsey. Thanks for being here.
Hi, my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm excited to talk about your book, which is called Underestimated: The Wisdom and Power of Teenage Girls, because I just read it over the last couple of days because I wanted it to be fresh in my mind. And so I have lots of questions related to that. Before we get into it, though, I want to start the way I do with everything, which is to have you tell me about your own relationship with feminism.
Oh, it is so important to me, actually, feminism. And to me, feminism is not about man hating or thinking women are better than men, or like a lot of the societal projections that are put onto that word is not at all how I experience it. And I can expand on that, which I think we will likely discuss. But it is, for me personally, about just my inherent worth as a human being on the planet that deserves equal rights and opportunities and access, and that no one is inherently better than another person, and that we need to advocate because there is an imbalance to who has access to opportunities. So that advocacy exists in the idea of feminism.
Here,
if it isn't intersectional, it isn't feminist. I know because we previously talked that you feel the same way. And I was so pleased to see throughout your book references to people like Bell Hooks and Maya Angelou, people that are really, Black women that are really important in feminism that often get overlooked. And so I love that you did that. And I think we definitely share that philosophy.
Yeah, I actually often just identify as an intersectional feminist. I'll often say that instead. But I found that when I say that from the get-go of a person who doesn't understand the term, it can get more confusing for them. And sometimes I'm just kind of looking for the way into the conversation because we are still dealing with stereotypes slapped onto that word, just real basic ones.
Which, yes, brings me to my first question from the book. In the chapter about power, I don't remember which chapter it is, but it's towards the end of the book, you are talking about feminism with girls, teenage girls, and that one of the things that you saw happen again and again is these girls having their fathers or some other man in their life that they love saying that feminism is basically hating on men, as you just mentioned. That's still decades later, this common refrain. And I was wondering, it actually just made me think about teenage girls and feminism and how that's evolved. I identified as a feminist at the age of the girls in this book, but it was in the 90s in a different time. I wouldn't have had a clue about intersectional feminism there. I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw, I don't think I had even coined the phrase yet. But I didn't have that kind of understanding. I was a basic white feminist in those days. And I just wonder, what have you noticed about how girls now have evolved in their relationship with feminism and their understanding of feminism?
And I teach an entire workshop for girls about this exact topic. And actually, Kimberly Crenshaw coined it in 1989. And we it didn't populate and become a known thing until what I would call, honestly, what we're in is more of a fourth wave feminism. You and I grew up under a third wave feminism that, you're right, was way more white feminism. And now fourth wave has become so much more intersectional. And the girls, Gen Z is so much better about that inclusivity and advocating not just for women of color, but trans women and, the full range of, we're not free unless we're all free, right? And it has become much more accepted to call yourself a feminist. I would say when we were growing up, it was way more risque. And that said, they are continually shocked by how much pushback they get, because the Gen Z girls are like, they're on social media where feminism is way more accepted. And then they go and talk to their dad, and their dad is functioning under second wave feminism, right? Like the bra burning women, type of thing. I think it's just a bunch of angry feminists. And so there's just this huge disconnect. So what I always teach girls to do is to actually reference the dictionary definition of feminism or intersectional feminism and say it to their dad. They define it as they speak about it. Like, well, I'm a feminist because, as the Cambridge Dictionary definition says, it's equal rights and opportunities for men and women. And, that's a quick summary of it, but you can memorize it yourself. And the men, when they hear that, they're always like, oh, okay. And then I always teach the girl to be like, do you not believe? And then they're always like, well, I mean, that's not really how I see it. And she's like, oh, well, that's the dictionary definition, so I'm going to just use that, okay? Then the guy's all flustered. And then oftentimes the dad is like, okay, I can get on board with that. But if the dad doesn't get on board, what's been really cool and empowering is that the girl is like, I don't care if he does agree with me. That's what I believe. And that she doesn't need her dad to approve or say okay to her calling herself and identifying herself as an intersectional feminist.
I love that. Yeah, it's our husbands that are still struggling with that definition or that understanding. And certainly that's my experience on social media when I'm out talking about feminism. I rarely, although sometimes still do, because I think we have a whole other group of people who've been radicalized by social media and other ways, young men. But mostly it's older men that come in with the you hate all men sort of thing. And so I totally understand that.
Oh, sorry. I'm a fan, though, of meeting them exactly where they're at. And instead, I'm fortunate in that I don't get particularly triggered when a man pushes back on me. And instead, I just really listen to see what their holding up, their blocking thing is for them. I ask a lot of questions so I can figure out what story they're projecting onto it, what narrative, right? And then I address that with them and meet them exactly where they're at. Whereas it can be really triggering, especially for a girl with her father, to be like, type of thing. So the more I can get them to a place where they just really have a peace about it, about how they identify, and they have nothing to prove, they don't need anyone to agree with them, then that's actually the place when a conversation really happens.
I do get triggered. I wish I could say I don't, but I'm not so good at meeting them where they are. I tend to just end up going lower, which is not the best answer. So I'm working on it, but I appreciate that. And I think that'll be great because we're going to talk in our bonus conversation for subscribers of the newsletter about your service as on the board for A Call to Men, which maybe either that's part of why you're able to meet those men where they are, or that's why you're so well suited to that, or both. But we will talk about that in the bonus conversation. So make sure that you subscribe if you want to hear more about that part, about getting men on board and sort of helping them change some of these beliefs, because it is critically important. It's just not everyone's built for that work.
Exactly. So no, I'm saying talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, okay. So this interview is going to be about your book and about the subject of your book, but also a lot more than that, because obviously these listeners are not teenagers, although many of them are probably moms, some of them to teenagers. So I do think it's important to talk about some of the lessons just for our listeners who are moms to teenagers to think about. I think we also talked about, and we'll get to in a little while, about the piece that I think is really interesting, because I don't have a teenage girl, but I was a teenage girl, is the healing lessons from this for healing our own inner teenage girl. And I want to talk about you sort of as a business owner, as you're going out and, written this book and all that has been involved in that journey. So we will talk about all of those things too. So if anyone's listening and like, I don't have a teenage girl, I don't know if this is for me, I promise there's going to be a lot inside of this for you. So stick around. But first, I do want to start with hearing about what made you want to write this book, this topic. I know that you worked with girls, but what made you think like these stories and these things need to be told?
Well, it actually really addresses what you brought up, which is healing your inner teenage girl. What I found is so many of the issues that hold us back in womanhood as adult women, people pleasing, self-doubt, perfectionism, shame, all of those wounds started in our teenage years. And so by me moving upstream and addressing not only how we're parenting teenage girls, which the book is very practical in that way, but also how we, reparent ourselves or really heal that time of our life and understand what mechanisms made us become people pleasing in the first place, or what mechanisms created a habit where we make ourselves small and we don't say our opinions and our voice in a bigger, louder way and claim our power in the world as adult women. And so part of it was what the girls were telling me, the teenage girls, I heavily involved them in the process. They helped edit, they give quotes, they were there with me every step. And the things that they were struggling with are the same things we're all still struggling with. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if we didn't have to, what if we started earlier? And what kind of women would we have in the future? What type of leaders would we have that would be so much more empowered? So that was a huge motivation too.
And I will be asking a question exactly about that, because I was like, this book, really, you could just take off the teenage girls and just say this is a book for women too, because it really is. Nothing substantially changes, which is sort of sad, but also it's nice because there's so much in there for us. But it makes me, I don't know if you've read Why Does Patriarchy Persist by Carol Gilligan and Naomi Snyder, but they talk about the psychology of patriarchy and sort of how we are indoctrinated into it as people, and how psychologically we end up indoctrinated. And for boys, there's this early round that happens around 5 to 7, which I've watched with my own boys, kind of when they start going to school and they learn they're not supposed to cry and they have to be strong and all of those things. For girls, the indoctrination tends to happen a little later, because obviously we think girls, we don't see them until they become what's basically with puberty, right? With the dawn of puberty and that their bodies begin to change, that is when they really begin to learn the message that they are supposed to show up in the world a certain way. All those things you mentioned, people pleasing, caretaking, timid, quiet, all of that, small. And that all starts to happen around that right before teenage years. So what you're talking about, it just aligns with the psychology of it, which is that we start to get those messages right when our bodies begin to change about how we are supposed to show up. And so you're talking to girls who are kind of in that. They're maybe a little older. I don't know. What's the age range of the girls you were talking to for the book? I don't remember if it said.
There's mostly high school, but I definitely have middle school girls. I mean, heck, it was probably 12 to 20 even. And these are long-term relationships too. This is
Yeah.
not just, doing a one quick off interview where I barely know the girl.
Yeah. And that 12, I mean, like, that's really that where they're really starting to get indoctrinated into this. And so what were the stereotypes that they are saying that they are feeling about them?
Well, we all know these stereotypes, right? Because when people have a baby girl instead of a baby boy, the first thing they often hear is like, oh, just wait until she's a teenager. You're in for it, right? It's this real negative perception that she's going to be emotional and dramatic and crazy and mean. I mean, the amount of people that have said to me, oh my gosh, how could you write about teenage girls? They're so mean. And I'm like, geez, that is not a nice thing to say if you think about it. And the girls hear that and they absorb it. And, girls did not come out of the womb mean. They confronted a society that is not particularly safe or kind. If anything, it's quite judgmental and criticizing to them. And they set up walls, so that, there's a certain degree of protection that they've had to integrate into their lives. But the girls, once those walls come down, oh my gosh, they're just the best. They're full of enthusiasm and love and passion and goodness, and they want to help people. And that's who they really are.
Yeah, you talk about them being emotional a lot too, like being perceived as or being called emotional. When
As
so much of it, in a bad way, right? Well, when we hear that word now, emotional, especially when applied to women, and when applied to men, really just in our society, the word emotional is fraught with, like, it's very clear that it means something bad, right? We are not supposed to be emotional. We're supposed to be stoic and brave and strong and all these things. And being emotional doesn't make you strong, and just all of these horrible stereotypes. But I love that you sort of spell out that the emotional piece it's the fact that they are passionate, that they care, they aren't afraid to express, like, all of it. That word emotional we perceive as so negative, but really the things that we're describing are things that we should really be honoring in all people, not just teenage girls, but all of us.
Well, I always say that the first chapter is feelings. That is where I start, right? And I always say that, they say teenage girls have big feelings. Adults have big feelings too. We just got really good and trained, indoctrinated, as you say, to squash and suppress and stuff them deep down inside of us until we all deal with them in therapy, in our midlife. And it's so fascinating to see a teenage girl just actually express it in the moment and process it and let the emotion pass through her and be done with it. And there's a lot to be said when you just support someone in that space and you're just like, yeah, that sucks. Instead of trying to jump in and fix it and slap positivity really quickly on it because you're uncomfortable, or avoid it altogether and power through. We have all these coping mechanisms that we think are the right thing, because if we feel a negative emotion, that must be awful, right? And it's, whether it's disappointment or frustration or anger, we're taught to just try to not feel those. But those are completely and utterly normal human emotions. And if you block them, that does more harm than actually acknowledging them, your full humanity, and being like, yeah, I'm bummed out right now.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I remember being a teenage girl, even though it feels like eons ago, but I do remember the experience of being a teenage girl and all the things you're talking about. And one of the things I remember, and I am sure you've heard from all the girls that you talk with, is I'm not going to be like my mom when I grow up. I'm not going to do this. I would never do this to my daughter when I grow up. I'm going to remember this, and I'm going to know how to, like, talk to her and listen to her and be there for her and support her and all of that. And then I read the chapter about beauty and the ways that younger girls dress. And it immediately takes me to my nieces, who I adore, and they are brave, smart, outspoken, wonderful young feminists who are, now 18. Oh my God, I can't believe they're becoming adults, but they've been teenagers. And I can feel all that same stuff come up, of that discomfort of, like, oh, I can't believe she's wearing that. And that's maybe not the right thing to wear, again, because of the ways that men show up in the world. And rather than it being about how do men change, it's like this instinct to protect our daughters, right? That shows up. And so much of even the stuff around not showing emotions, or, so many of the things that we talk about, we are doing to our daughters in a protective way. We feel like we are, yet we're causing harm. And I just wonder, like, what did this book show you or make you think about how we go from those teenage girls ourselves who swear we'll never be that way into moms who start doing the same things to our daughters.
We covered so many good things here. And the harm that's done is shame. That's what happens. The way girls perceive commentary on their clothes, and I'm going to even use the word commentary to lighten it, because it's criticism and judgment happens big time, right? But even commentary, they receive in a shameful, judgy way, in a way that does harm and harms their relationship to their looks and their beauty and their worth and their body. And I actually have started to take a pretty big stance on just, we do not comment on girls' bodies. We do not comment on their looks. We don't comment on their clothes, which takes a lot of release. And I know it's out of the intention of protecting, like you said, and the amount that I have been talking about this topic, right, within interviews and so on, I always say, what if instead of 90% of the time I'm spent talking about whether that girl should wear it or not should wear it, we spend all that time talking about on how we raise our boys, right? And how we raise them to control their urges and how, they're very capable of handling themselves and not sexualizing and objectifying girls, but we don't put any energy in teaching them that. Only 11 states in their sex education curriculum require that consent be taught. Like, we're failing our boys too. Like, they're not getting the right education.
I didn't know that till I read that stat in the book, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that is alarming as a mom of a boy. Well,
Yeah.
I've been teaching him consent since he was born, but it terrifies me that that's not part of like sex ed curriculums as standard.
Right. And so instead, we put all the blame, all the responsibility, all the judgment on the girl's shoulders. And she feels it. The amount they tell me that they feel slut shamed for every little thing that they do. And I have a sexuality chapter too, because there's also a space that's wildly unexplored for girls to actually safely explore what their sexuality is. Because right now, they cannot do anything right? Like, it is either way too sexy, or it's not, it's completely closed down and shut off and full of fear and shame, right? Like, there's very little middle ground, and the poor girls are trying to explore it and talk about it in a safe way, and there's no space to do it.
Yeah, it makes you think of the scene in Barbie, right? Where it's, you have to be pretty and sexy, but not too sexy. You have to be smart, but not too smart. All of that, and that balancing act that you can't win at, and it feels horrible.
That's your idea, though, about how the moms, right, can show up and kind of break that cycle, right? So what I have found is, what we bring it back to that trigger we talked about, right? What we are triggered with. I am very focused on a parent healing their own inner teenage girl, because the only thing in their control and power is their own healing, right? As much as a parent, and I've seen it, wants to control their daughter, which is that urge to protect or teach, it just has a backlash, right? It does the opposite. It's not effective, is what I see. The girls shut down, close you out, close off from actually connecting, and do things instead in secret and hiding and in shame. That is the dynamic I see when you have that urge to control. And so instead, when that trigger comes up, you actually ask yourself the questions like, why is it uncomfortable for me to talk about sexuality with my daughter? Like, why is it uncomfortable to me that she's wearing this outfit? Like, instead, and then approach her with genuine curiosity that's like, how does this outfit make you feel? Like, why do you want to wear it? But like a true tone of no judgment, right? Of just like, okay, cool, interesting. I hadn't seen it from that perspective. And just so she doesn't feel judged, that's what creates a safe space for her to be more honest with you, to listen to your input. But you have to be valuing her voice in the conversation first, and seeking to understand first. And then when she feels that type of respect, then she's way more open to a conversation.
Yeah, for the moms of teenage girls or young girls who are going to become teenage girls, I think there's so much great information in here about creating safe spaces, how to listen, how not to judge, how to, as difficult it is. And I even was thinking about it as my son today. I know it's not a teenage girl, but my 8-year-old son was feeling sad about something. And I want to be like, tell me what it is, and almost force it out of him. It doesn't work. And all that does is start to shut him down more and feel like he can't come to me. And there was such great advice in the book that made me think of like, no, just saying, I see that you're upset. Can I give you a hug? And I did. And he was so happy with that. And I, just that reminder that if you want to chat, I'm in my office, even though I know that was not even, you're like, not even that pressure to feel like they have to come and talk to you. Let them come to you on their own by building that genuine trust of just, I see how you're feeling. That's valid and real, right? Giving that space.
And the
it's so
practical
hard
tool,
to do.
I know. And one practical tool to lean on is to reflect back the exact words that they use, right? If they say, I'm just feeling bummed out, say, yeah, I get why you're bummed out. Just actually say the exact words they said, because then they feel heard and understood. And then, I will, with follow-up, if you do want to, it's always phrasing as a question, right? Like, how can I support you in this? What do you need right now? And then particularly for girls, they're not asked that a lot, and that they need to develop that mechanism of checking in and asking themselves, what do I need right now? So often parents are frustrated because they're like, well, she says I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, because she hasn't been given a lot of space to go figure it out, and to actually check in and be like, wait, what do I need? And so I always say when a girl says I don't know, I'm like, okay, great, take some time, I'll ask again in a week or two. I really trust that you're going to be able to think about this and figure out some things that you need or what type of support you might need. I trust you to figure that out for yourself. And then they're like, oh my gosh, my parent trusts me. And what I see is the girls rise to the occasion.
We just don't give them the opportunity. And that is, and again, it's one of those things that here's the difference I think that happens between being a teenager and then becoming the mom of a teenager is when you're a teenager, you don't understand. Your parents tell you, but you just don't understand what it's like to be a parent, right? And that desire, that need to protect your child, and how that can get so twisted in ways that then end up causing harm where you certainly, I think as a kid, we sort of think our parents are being malicious in the harm. And the truth is most of the time, there's obviously that, but for most parents, it's not malicious. We're just trying so hard to protect our kids because we don't want to see them hurt. We don't want to see the world hurt them. And so it's just like, you mess up and you lose sight of who you want to be in this world. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, how did I become my mom? When I swore when I was 13, 14, I would never do it. And it just happened. It's so hard. But this book helps.
Well, thank you. And the choice chapter addresses that too, just how giving specifically a girl, a lot of agency. And everyone wants girls to be confident, right? We're all about confidence. What it is it's self-trust. They need to trust their own thoughts, trust their own voice, trust their own decisions, but they need the space to be given the choice, to make a choice that may be good or bad, one that you may or may not agree with. And what I have found when it is a choice that's maybe not the best choice or the one you thought of, they learn from it so much more thoroughly because it was their choice in the first place. So say it doesn't go exactly right. They're like, oh, whoa, is there a mistake to learn from? Rather than us kind of manipulating or buffering their bad choices all the time, there's no learning and growth space for them. And it's that type of, so when they're out in the real world, out in college, and they hadn't had enough space to develop self-trust. And there's a lot that I see play out when that hasn't happened.
Yeah, in a minute, I want to get to healing your inner teen because I think all of us experience the ways it doesn't happen, right? And for ourselves when we don't develop that self-trust. But I want to ask about social media really quickly because I know I saw an interview or somewhere where you had said that was the number one thing people ask you about with teen girls is about social media. And I think we can all imagine the ways that would make it harder to be a teen than when we were teens, having to live in this sort of landscape that exists now. But are there any ways that it helps or that it is that girls are they don't know any different, but are there things you hear from them that make you think, oh, it's not so bad?
Yes, because we are in an era right now where parents in particular and adults want to villainize social media and make it the source of all the problems, right? And I, of course, right now, officially going to say, of course, there are harmful effects to social media, right? And it is not going anywhere, okay? It is here to stay in a big way. And we have to acknowledge that, that is solution oriented, is actually empowers the girl herself to make healthy decisions for herself or any teenager. And that's the space I'm interested in. And when we do fear, victimhood to it, she is shut down and does become a victim to social media, right? Because she's not seen another way how she can make active choices. There are choices. And so when you say, are there positive things? I have, first of all, plenty of girls that I know who make healthy choices with social media. They put their phone away at night, not because anyone forced them to or told them to. They don't follow certain accounts that make them not feel good about themselves. Like they're actively evaluating the social media that they intake. And if anything, I find teenage girls are way more complex about how they talk about it, whereas the parents are really simplified. Like, oh my gosh, that post is making her feel awful about her body. And that is, they very simplify the connection to it. So I love engaging in kind of depth-filled conversations with girls where I bring up posts. I'm like, what do you think of that? What does that communicate? I'm getting inside their head about it. But in terms of positive things, girls have had, or all teenagers have had so much more access to mental health and psychology ideas. That is all over social media and they love it. Gen Z loves it. They have had so much more access to social justice issues, climate change, racial justice, feminism. I mean, the amount of girls that have sent me a TikTok video about feminism, it brings me such joy. And they just want somebody to relate to about it and say, oh yeah, that's cool. I feel that way too. Right. And so there's a lot of good potentials if you actively engage. I always talk to a girl about how to affect the algorithm for themselves, but then based off of what they like and what they save, you can actually have active choice in what the algorithm is feeding you. And I know that sounds a little bit controversial, what I'm saying, because there's plenty of research showing how the harmful effects, right? I hear it. And I've seen girls in the active trenches change the story. So there's that side of it.
Well, and there's advice that I think is valid for all of us to hear, because if your social media feed is making you feel shitty about yourself, if your social media feed is making you constantly, compare, criticize, judge others, judge yourself, making you feel attacked, whatever, minimize, check what you're doing. Where are you what are you interacting with? What are you engaging with? Because it can be beautiful. I mean, especially TikTok, I have found really scarily has the algorithm thing figured out. And, mine's filled with queer love and feminist, wonderful feminist rants and and then also lots of stuff that feels like it would satisfy my life and make my life better and bring me pleasure.
I totally agree.
Yeah, it's totally possible. And I think it's so important. It's funny because you said too that they're not only just learning about feminism, they're sharing about it, because I see them, especially on my TikTok, younger and younger. I'm learning so much from young feminists, in college and even younger, mostly college by the time I'm seeing them, but that know so much. And your last chapter of the book's called Liberation. And there's quotes from girls talking about liberation from the systems that hold us back. I didn't understand anything about systemic issues in high school or junior high. I had to take a women's studies course in college to get to that place, So I do think there's just so much positive that we don't talk about because we get so focused on the negative. And I think for parents, it's important for us to think about what could be positive here, because like you said, it's not going away. And how do we help influence more of the positive instead of fixating on the negative?
Oh gosh, and you're right. They all know about systems, oppressive systems. They all know about, first of all, there's all the stats about anxiety being so high for teenage girls, right? Part of me has become to wonder, I didn't think I knew that word in high school. I totally had anxiety, but I couldn't name it. Maybe just all the girls have finally a word to name what they're feeling, right? And we have a long history of maybe women being a bit anxious because we live in a patriarchy that's not, that great. So and also, by the way, them knowing the term patriarchy, right? I could go on and on. Their actual vocabulary is bigger because of social media. And then they also feel powerful. And I know a lot of people would quickly dismiss that as oh, stupid social media. They think they just want to be an influencer. The truth is influencers are somewhat powerful. And we actually have to start acknowledging that and understand that there are a lot of people who came from really environments that never would have had a microphone before in our old system, in our history, never would have had such quick access to a voice and to a microphone. And people who have been historically oppressed now have a way to amplify their message and their voice. I mean, that's really interesting too and cool. And we could shine light on what that space looks like because they see it as a source of power lots of times.
Gosh, and that goes to what you were saying about just asking, why do you like, or not even why, because as a coach, I know that why questions are not great questions. That makes people on the defensive. But what is it that you like about being an influencer, right? What is it about this thing, about this that's making you feel great? Because if we just took time to listen, you might hear them say, I love having a voice. I love getting, yes.
I've asked it many times, and that's usually what they say.
And how many of us women feel that, right? We want that too, because we've been made to feel like our voices need to be so small that many of us can't even hear them anymore. And so to hear girls like, when we minimize what it is that they're doing, it is harmful
it's
to them.
superficial. We would love to say it's vanity and superficial. And so, but really the issue is the judgment too, right? Like they feel so judged and therefore, yeah, they're going to shut you out. I mean, what girls, they want to be a part of the conversation. They want to have a voice. They want to be respected, right? So that's why that type of conversation matters. Even if you don't agree with the answer, letting her have a voice to give an answer is important.
Yeah. And that, to me, it feels like, and now let's get into healing our own teenage girl, because it feels like when we are passing our shame onto them by dismissing, diminishing, devaluing them, making everything that they're into feel frivolous and silly, we're really doing it to ourselves too, right? Because we're reinforcing those messages that were given to us. Because if it's true for them, it's true for us too. And if it's true for us, then it must be true for them, or we need it to be true for them. Because if it's not true for them, then what does it say about us, right? It causes this cognitive dissonance of like, well, if it's not silly and frivolous for you to use your voice or to feel that way, then what's going on? Why am I still feeling that way? Like, so this doesn't make sense. It's almost like we do it because we need it to make sense for ourselves, because it doesn't. Yeah. And so
it's our own baggage, right? It's our own wounds that we project onto not only daughters and kids and teenage girls, we project stories onto everyone around us. And you know, the teenage girls themselves tell me, they're like, that's not my story. That's not how I see it. That's not how I live it. That's not how I experience it. And because there is a big generational gap now, right? With that advent of technology and social media, there's a bigger generational gap in ways that parents really don't understand all the things, their world in that way. So yeah, we project a lot of stories onto people, and we want to make it true for them because it's our own baggage.
Yeah. Well, and so much of what you talk about in the book, things like choice and consent, pleasure without shame, like, and I love I think it was that one that started with Adrienne Marie Brown's quote, because there's nobody better to talk about pleasure than Adrienne Marie Brown. But, and, you know, perfectionism and self-doubt and all of these things that you talk about are all things that we either want to solve for ourselves as adult women. Right. I don't know any adult women that, like, not any. I know very few adult women who don't feel some shame or guilt about pleasure. And I don't mean just sexual pleasure, but in any way of just enjoying their life, right? Because we're so conditioned to care for others and please everyone else.
Make an excuse for it. We have to rationalize a vacation, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I talk about it in the sexuality chapter that words like, you know, there's so much fear-based everything around this topic, right? Words like STD or rape or teen pregnancy, right? Like those are scary words. Also, I see just as much fear around words like orgasm, clitoris, and pleasure. Like the idea that a girl should have pleasure and sexual pleasure. I mean, people are like, I can't believe you're talking about that. And it's wild because we do that for boys. Like the media completely permissions boys. That's what, you know, sexuality is for them. It's a pleasure focus. So what is this? And to me, it has so much to do with the root of our power and how we've been minimized and controlled. And our sexuality's been, so many stories have been told about it that we all adopt and believe and integrate into our own minds. I mean, it's that one to unwrap, to do your own healing journey around your relationship to sexuality and your body. I mean, that's where the revolution starts.
For sure. That is huge. And like I said, it goes beyond even that part too, although I think that is so huge and so important. But all of like just rest, the fact that we deserve rest and being able to take that rest without guilt. I mean, even when I see women who do engage in something pleasurable, there's like this guilt that comes along. Even if they can get past the shame, then they get into the guilt of like, I should be doing something else. And does this mean I don't, care about other people because I'm prioritizing myself? I'm selfish.
Yes. So that's another huge pattern I found is how much we indoctrinate girls into thinking that they need to be humble and selfless and, put everyone else's needs before their own. And that they're so scared of having an ego or being thought of as arrogant. And I have a quote in the book of a girl being like, we don't have some epidemic of girls with big egos or women, actually we have an epidemic of women making themselves too small. And what is this narrative of selflessness versus selfish? And so I've been in this, this has been a hard space because my book has done so well. And I'm sharing big, successful things on social media that have happened for me. And I see it flare up for me in a way that I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to think I'm bragging. People are going to think I'm, promoting myself. And I'm thinking, wait, if I'm going to tell girls that they should be doing in this world, I need to model for them what it looks like to live a big life, to live a bold life, to own my success, because my heart is in the right place. This is about helping all women. This isn't about me like making money or some other pursuit. And by the way, even the fact that I have to make that excuse is so interesting, right?
Because even if it is, that's okay.
Yeah, I know, but like men, right? Like their permission to claim their success in any way, whether it's just financial or whatever it might be, right?
And I think for the moms, again, listening, this is important because I have found in my own coaching work with my clients, so often women are really reluctant to make these big kinds of changes for themselves. As soon as you can frame it in a way where it's like, what is it that you're modeling for your child? What is the experience you want your child to have? What chains are you trying to break? It's these lineage things that have been passed on from generation after generation of women to women to women. What is it that you want to change? And how can you do that by modeling? Or what does it look like? Then suddenly women are able to step into their power more to say, if I can't do it for me, I'm sure as hell going to do it for her because I want to stop this, right?
Yes,
I hate that it takes
that.
that. I hate that it takes that for women and whatever it takes, because we do need to be able to step into our power, to use our voice, to live a big life. I love that you said live a big life. Like, yeah, of course we do. So what is this book, this experience of being in relationship with all of these teen girls, digesting that in a way of writing this book and now being out there and talking about it, not just with teen girls, but with women? What's it teaching you about your own inner teen girl? And how is it changing you now as an adult woman?
Oh, I mean, and it's happened so fast. The up leveling of it, like the last 6 months have been so insane from the support from like Oprah Daily and Hello Sunshine. Like these massive entities have come to support me in a way that I went like 0 to 10. And I have had to up level my own sense of power and responsibility with that, of my own voice, like that what I have to say is important. People are responding to it. And it is having incredible ripple effects, like hearing women across the country, like DMs or, I get messages on the website and all sorts of things of like how it's helping women and how it's impacting them or changing their relationship with their daughter, and realizing that the ripple effect of me just using my voice bravely, unapologetically, has an impact, and then owning it and saying it out loud and telling people that that's what's happening so that I can continue doing that, right? Like I continue getting speaking engagements or be put on bigger platforms. And it has created a lot of discomfort for me because of this issue of self-promotion. I think everyone tries to put women in this box so fast, or we put ourselves in it. Like we just want to promote ourselves. And that's, I don't know, I would love to know your thoughts on that, because I've been grappling like, that's not my intention. That's not what it's about for me. But I have this fear around it being that. And so that's been a block for me that's come up. I'm like telling you in real time, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'll just quickly step in to say that, of course.
Go ahead, jump in.
Because I think that we are so conditioned that anything about ourselves is selfish, right? It's always is framed that way. I rarely hear boys and men being called selfish for taking care of themselves, for actions that they're doing and that are for them. I mean, men go golfing and they're not being called selfish. They're just like going out golfing. A woman's like, I'm going to go do something for half an hour by myself. And it's like, that's so selfish. So I think, of course, like anything that puts shines a light on ourselves has made it, we've been conditioned to think that that's selfish. And also because we have been conditioned to be so small with small voices and be, every way diminish ourselves, that anything that feels like it's putting a light on us and sort of making our light bigger feels really uncomfortable. But I think it is so important for you to do it because for that very reason that men, I just have never experienced men grappling with these same issues at the level that women do. There are individual men, and sometimes they have these little flare-ups and things happen. But I just don't see it happening the way I have never had a client, and my clients are almost all women, never had a client who isn't uncomfortable with the spotlight, with attention, who isn't uncomfortable with taking time for herself. And I've had male clients too, and those things just don't come up ever.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's unusual that you feel that way, but I think that first of all, it wouldn't matter if you are doing this solely for money. Wouldn't matter, right? But the fact that you aren't, it's like the piece that I think is so important is, again, that role modeling. Because you can't, how do you write a book that's telling us to quit underestimating girls, and then you show up underestimating yourself?
Right. And I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. I am pushing through the discomfort. And I will also say too, it's fear of judgment that holds women back, because that's really the block, right? Like, I'm just a little scared that I'm going to get judged, and I still do it, right? I still push through because that's so my thing I'm putting out there. But I see it not only with the girls, but everyone is just so scared of being judged. And guess what? We are judgy.
You will be judged because you're doing something that other women haven't allowed themselves to do. And again, it's that projection thing of our own baggage. Rather than dealing with my own baggage, it's a lot easier just to project out on you and judge you, because then I don't have to judge myself for not doing the thing.
This pool of everyone's triggers coming at me, right? And I just got to deal with that and do what's right for me and push forward. And yeah, I am trying to heal the world in the judgment category. That's what I speak on a lot about. I think if we can create an environment, the same idea too of girls supporting girls, women supporting women, where instead we just celebrate each other. We don't evaluate. We don't say, well, she should have done this, or she should be more like this, or she should be wearing this, No shoulds. Thank you. You're doing this for all women and making space for all of us, right? That's the energy I'm trying to put out there.
I love it, and it's needed. And it would be unrealistic and a lie to say that you won't get judgment. You will. There are going to be women, especially, who will judge you. And so we have to be able to say, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's the part I think that's so hard. Because it'd be one thing if we could be like, oh, no one's going to judge you. But then the first time you're judged, and you will be, it will shut you down. And so you have to go into it knowing, I'm going to get judged. I'm going to do it anyway.
Exactly. I like radical acceptance around it. And then, I make sure I'm really centered and grounded on my own integrity, on what my intention is, why I'm doing this, that I have to stay centered on that, or you get caught up in all these other narratives so fast.
And finding and cultivating communities with other women who have done their own healing work, who have healed their teenage girls, by reading this book, reading other things, so that they are able to be there with you and support you in the way that you're looking for. I think it's so important to have that. And I'm going to guess teenage girls, I don't remember this in the book, but you may have covered it, but I'm going to guess, you did talk about friends. That's right. There was a chapter on friendship. So that's probably where this is coming from. But I just think girls get it. They get that they need that support network. And we sometimes lose sight of that as adults, but we need it too.
I have the whole chapter on it. I'm all about how teenage girls have that ride or die type of friendship style. That's I got you, they hold each other, they sob in each other's arms, right? They are there for the mess, and they call each other about things, and it's the art of the slumber party, right? I talk about how now I've integrated adult lady slumber parties, because that when you have a full 24 hours, you get real with your friends and your community. You actually share your mess. You feel the type of support you need. Instead, as adults, what happens is we get caught up in kind of these interactions that are really a quick 1 hour dinner that's how are you? How are you? And we just kind of say the details and facts of life or our accomplishments or something, and we're not actually saying, oh, this has been awful. I need support around this. But the girls, man, I think we could have so much to learn from teenage girl friendships. And it's funny because everyone loves to talk about the mean girl aspect and that part of it. And that is ending. We're actually moving out of that time. Yes, does it still exist because we're messy, imperfect humans? Yes. But Gen Z girls know that girls are supposed to be supporting girls, right? That wasn't necessarily the same messaging we got when I was younger. But now, you can see it on the social media posts, how they amp each other up in the comments. They're yeah, girl. They're so full of exclamation points. And I'm I love it. When they comment on my posts, I love it. I'm
my nieces do that for me too. And it's just always oh, God, it feels like you've been, had a celebrity comment on something when your teenage nieces are That's amazing. You're awesome. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel really great. I think this may also be why I watch so many teenage girl friendship sort of TV shows and movies, because I think I'm healing some of that for myself too.
Yeah.
Of like, we had that when we were young, then we lost it, and trying to refine that it's so hard to make friends, especially real, deep, meaningful friendships as an adult, because
Yeah,
it becomes about your kids and their friends' parents, and it's like it becomes more like friendships of convenience or necessity versus like who you would really bond with. So
you have to be so intentional. I'm really intentional in that. Like, I'll say, hey, I'm pursuing you as a friend. And then I kind of like share with them something vulnerable and like invite them into the same space and tell them, I really say it out loud when I want a new, deep, vulnerable friendship so that they feel safe. And they're like, oh, okay, that's what she actually wants. Wait, I want that too. Because everyone is insecure about it, honestly.
And they're all looking for friends, and everyone's afraid to take that first step. It's like dating. It's such a weird experience. But I want to go to the behind some of the stuff about your business and your own experience, especially now, because if I'm not mistaken, this is your first book, right? You're a first time book author.
Yeah.
So what was the experience like of writing it, finding a publisher, getting it to print? Like, what was that like for you? Because I don't know very many women that are listening to this that probably don't have a book in their head too. Almost every woman who owns a business that I've ever met has some book or many that they want to write, but it feels overwhelming and scary and just so big. So how did you bring this to life?
Oh, good. I'm happy to share. I will say I had some added benefits that I live in Los Angeles and that I'd been working in the entertainment industry. So while I was tutoring and mentoring, I was also screenwriting, writing movies, and I would option them. None got made. So I was in kind of the writing world of, in LA. When you live in LA, you meet a lot of people and make friends with a lot of people that have connections and so on. So I had friends who were authors already. So that I'm really thankful for that kind of guidance I got from them. And I'm trying to continue the cycle and give guidance to women however I can to help them. But some of the best advice I got actually was to write a lot of the book first. I know a lot of people want to write a proposal because then you'll be paid to write the full book, right? And what it was is that you don't really know what book is inside you until you start writing it. And what happens is when you do a proposal first, it's a different type of brain. It's a pitching, selling type of brain. Whereas you just sitting down and starting to write the book of your soul and your dreams, there's so much more authenticity and creativity that comes from that generating starting point. And you learn what it is you're supposed to even be selling, right? Like if I had gone straight to the proposal, I think I would have sold something different than what would have come out of me. And that's a problem. That's a big issue. Whereas because I had actually a full first draft of the book, when I went to get an agent, and then I got an agent who helped me do the proposal, and then she took that proposal out to publishers. I went actually very traditional, went out to publishers. It was actually very exciting. We took meetings. I ended up getting a preempt offer, before a bidding war. It was wild. I had a dream come true situation. But I think it was a lot to do with the fact that my initial, I'm going to use kind of a woo word of like vibration that I put into that book was my pure heart and soul. And I think because of that, everyone has felt that, right? The agent, the publisher, the audience, the readers now, it has not been diluted and controlled. Like the publisher knew what they were buying. And then I stayed true to it through the entire editing process, right? I was like, nope, you guys all know I'm very quirky. Like, this is who I am. That's what you bought, and they were like, yeah, instead of them putting what they think it should be or this audience and stuff. And I think that there's an authenticity to that that's really helped. So, the getting the agent I got through just having friends who had agents. So that's where that's one real specific spot I benefited. They sent it on to their agents, and I took meetings and really liked one. And then, and I know that's usually one of the hardest first steps for people. So I don't mean to be light, create levity around it, but and then through the editing process, which is really intense, that is where you need to make sure too, you are so grounded in your vision and your voice. You cannot see everything. You 100% need an editor. Okay. My editor 100% made the book better. And I definitely pushed back on some stuff that I was like, no, I know that's important. And one of them, she's not going to probably hear this podcast, but one of them was the inner teenage girl stuff. My editor, that wasn't like her big thing about it. She's more of a parent. She wanted more of that. And I was like, no, I know this is so important. It's important why I'm writing it, right? So I really stood by it. And thank heaven I did, because it's something that has resonated for so many women. So, thank heaven I was at my own personal journey of really having a lot of self-worth in my own voice and what I had to say to the world to be ready for those types of conversations.
And then comes the promotion piece of this, which when we first talked, you were just like starting that journey. And now you're really deep in the promotional piece of this, because I think it had just come out when we first talked. And I was like, let's hold off and do the interview a little later, because I want to talk a little bit about that experience. Because at the time you were talking about like, there may be something with Hello Sunshine. I don't know. That's happened. So you had well, I was just saying, you've had so much happen. You were on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna. You've been on Hello Sunshine, both on their YouTube channel with a series, and then on the Brightside podcast. You mentioned the Oprah Daily thing. Like, you've had so much happen. So what has that experience been like? I would assume it's overwhelming, but also I would assume it's challenging, like you were talking about earlier.
Well, and I had Time Magazine. Richard Branson posted about the book. I mean, crazy stuff. And so I would say the promotion of it has been, I thankfully am an extrovert. I really like talking about things. I was a theater kid growing up, so I can go on the news and speak well. And I think that's a really added benefit for an author. Most authors don't have that. And I would say my publisher really learned that about me early on and invested in me on the publicity marketing side. I know a lot of authors like to complain about their publisher not investing in publicity and marketing. And I'm going to share something about me believing in myself too. They had early, like a year ahead of time, they were like, they kept mentioning doing a book trailer if I was in New York, but we'd have to find somebody in LA, and how the book trailer helps pitch them to media. And they were saying it kind of casually. And I was like, wait, do I need this? Like, I was like, I can be in New York. Like, fine, I'll come to New York. I have tons of things to do in New York. And they were like, wait, really? You do that? I paid for my own ticket to go out to New York. Yes, I did a few other things while I was out there, but we filmed this book trailer, and they have actually a studio for it and everything. And it was awesome, right? Like and all of a sudden they were like, we can use it to pitch this, they can use that. And it was me believing in like, how can we help? What do you need? I would ask the team, what do you need to make this a success? How can I serve that vision? And because of that, they ended up investing in a media lunch where we invited media to attend. And that's where I made a lot of contacts that helped a lot of what happened, right? So there's a lot of early steps of you listening and believing in yourself and making things happen yourself. Or like a lot of times it was me making an introduction or my own initiation, but we all worked as a team for the larger vision.
It's so great to think about the fact that some of what you said, obviously there's privilege and there's luck and all of that in that, but there are lessons to be learned for people and so much of it sounds like believe in yourself, trust, it goes back to the book, the self-trust, and believing in that you have to believe in what you're putting out, the product you're putting out fiercely, and then also believe in yourself enough to think, I can make things happen for myself too. Like there's always this build it and they will come thing, but also sometimes you have to like get out there and do things and even challenge yourself in ways that can feel probably very scary, because I'm assuming that some of this has involved you having to really stretch yourself.
Oh, yeah, things I've never done before. I mean, the first time I was on national TV was the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, right? And I could go on and on. The first time I gave a big talk on teenage girls was on Necker Island with Richard Branson there. Like the first time I did a PowerPoint about it was that. Like a lot of times my firsts are my biggest thing, and I have to just truly believe that I can do it. That's that self-efficacy that's so important. And then also the investing in myself, like you rightly acknowledge that there's privilege. Of course there is, but it's not like I had a ton of money. I was an academic tutor, right? Me paying for that ticket, like I was investing in myself. And that has created, that action, that investment has created and expanded and multiplied in the way that I had hoped and envisioned. So I took risks big time.
And I'm watching our time. I'm going to finish here because I know we are getting almost to an hour. Because you, in addition to this stuff, so there's all of this around the teenage girls, which is taking up probably most of your time lately because you're full in promotion mode. But you also do corporate work, which is not just about talking about teenage girls, because you go in and teach communication strategies. It's similar to what's in the book ultimately, because it's about helping people feel seen, heard, understood, valued, and celebrated, as you say on your website. And so that's obviously what teen girls are looking for, and so much of the message in here, but it translates well beyond that. So if you could just quickly tell me a little bit about the corporate work where you're going in and speaking and giving teaching on these things for corporate clients, and maybe what are some lessons that our founder listeners might pull from that about what you teach?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I love this space because I won over one of the hardest groups, right? Teenage girls are one of the hardest groups to connect with. So those practical tools, you're right, can be transferred into a leadership space, right? Like how a leader motivates their team and makes them do their best work and want to be a part of that company and feel inspired. And it has a lot to do with how we affirm as a leader, how we affirm our team. Because lots of times we just expect them to get that thing done and get it done well and on time. But just by saying, hey, I really noticed how you executed that project and did it, and you compliment them with a lot of specificity. And the compliments chapter of the book really breaks that down on how to do that. But that's what I do in the corporate space is I talk about how you affirm your team so they feel seen, so they feel heard, how you invite their voice into conversations which creates psychological safety, which is something that corporate spaces really need. And there's a lot of stats to show how when an employee feels like their psychological safety in a work environment, they do so much better work. And that's usually them sometimes saying, hey, this isn't working for me. And a leader being like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Like we could do better at that. And that they would feel safe to bring it up where they're not going to be shut down. They're going to be heard and listened to and valued and respected. And then affirming like, hey, that was a smart idea, right? We hadn't thought of that. Thank you for helping us implement it and help. It's that invitation rather than a top-down mentality of you do what I tell you to do, right? No one's empowered in that environment.
And I think just to go back to the book one last time, and we'll wrap it up here, but it's the same thing for parents. We have to remember that we are not the CEOs of our children and that they are full humans from the moment they're born, not just when they are 18, but from the moment they're born, they're full humans with their own feelings and their own brains and ability to reason. And yeah, they have much to develop and we're there to help with that. But we're not there to just top down say, be dictators to our children. And that's the same for CEOs. And yeah, there are power dynamics in play in both relationships, but we have to think about how do I know it goes back to that. How do I earn respect versus demand respect? And that's true whether it's your child or your employee.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you totally get it. Thank you.
I love it. And I mean, as I was looking at them, like CEOs, but as you read the book, it's like, yeah, I mean, that's again why I would say this book is like, yeah, it's about teenage girls. But the truth is, it's just about being a human. And it's about respecting, learning from, valuing, caring about, celebrating humans. And so there's so much in there for ourselves. You can read it and think about, how does this relate to me? How does this relate to me with my staff? How does this relate to me with my child? How does this relate to me with just the world around me? There's so much in there that I think is just universal about being human. So thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, and before we go, I always ask for a resource. I think it's easy. It's Underestimated, the Wisdom and Power of Teenage Girls, your book.
Well, and on the website too, I have a book club guide that you can get for free. And it's such a good book club book, for mom book clubs or whatever it might be. And then that guide is fun. It's like per chapter, some good,
perfect.
Really helpful talking points.
I will link to that then. That's great. Thank you for that resource. And then what is a nonprofit or organization that's doing good work in the world that you'd like to highlight?
So we're going to talk about A Call to Men for your newsletter extra piece, but that's about getting men and boys behind the cause of educating around healthy manhood and healthy masculinity and ending gender-based violence and discrimination. And then also I'm the mentorship director of Democracy, and that is all about guiding and helping and supporting girls from underserved communities to rise into leadership roles or even run for office. And it's nonpartisan, but I've been in the trenches of these girls. It's nationwide. It's all done virtually. And these girls, they're doing incredible things. They often are coming from communities that have no support, whether it's for their identity or their beliefs. And they find community within Democracy in a way that completely and utterly empowers a new vision for themselves to become a leader.
I love it. And we need more girls or women, and especially women who hold more marginalized identities, to be excited about politics so much so that they want to get involved so that we can save democracy and change the, things that may be happening. So thank you for shining a light on that. I'm going to make a donation to the organization to say thank you for your time and encourage listeners to do the same. I will link to it in the show notes so you can learn more. And I will link to everything about Chelsey also in the show notes so you can go and connect with her and learn more from her. Thank you for your time. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Feminist Founders podcast. If you like what you heard and want to learn more, or if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing with the show, please visit feministfounderspodcast.com. There you can find out about becoming a paid subscriber for as little as the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, which will directly support my work. You can also find the show notes and find the bookshop.org website where you can order any of the books mentioned in this or any episode, which will also support the work I'm doing. The link to all of that is in the show notes. Thanks again, and I can't wait for our next episode.